Pediatric Lounge, a podcast taking you behind the door of the physician's lounge to get a deeper insight into just what docs are talking about today. From the clinically profound to the wonderfully routine and everything in between. Hi, George. Hi, Seth. How are you guys doing today?
Hi, how are you?
Super. Thanks, Herb.
So Seth is a good friend of mine and a good friend of the podcast. I won't dare say how many years I've known him, but it's been many.
Yeah, wise.
How is Sophia doing at Georgetown?
She's doing awesome. We successfully got one out of the house. We got one to go, and we're working hard every day to keep them there.
And your wife, is she still doing her PhD psychology coaching for high degree executives, or has she moved on from that?
No, she's still an executive coach. She only uses her PhD in psychology for the people that are both a little bit crazy and needing some coaching. But yeah, she's doing excellent. Her business is good. There's lots of people out there, especially post-pandemic, needing some help in their executive management skills.
Oh, wow. And walk us a little bit through your journey in pediatrics. I know you started very interesting. Your dad was a dermatologist, or is a dermatologist, still practicing in Rhode Island?
Yeah, he won't give it up. So yeah, still practicing.
And then you went to Canada for undergrad.
Yeah, I think the astute viewers will see that actually it's my McGill diploma over my left shoulder here. Yeah, I think my trip into medicine probably was not too different than most of the people out there. You know, I had an interest in science, and in high school, I chose to go to McGill mostly because it was relatively close to where I lived in New England, up in Quebec. Um, and it was had great pre-med program. I had some great experiences there, and went back to the US for medical school at Tufts, mostly because I didn't apply to McGill because my French wasn't good enough to go to medical school there. Had a couple of good years at Tufts, and I think just fell in love with pediatrics. It was my favorite rotation. I liked the work. I had some great mentors, some very smart pediatricians, some very academically minded pediatricians, and I thought, this is a career I could go into. And so that was kind of my journey into medicine. So again, not different from most pediatricians, I would imagine.
And that's where you crossed paths with Todd?
I crossed paths with Todd after my residency. So I did my residency at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. I basically left Boston seeking a place where I could afford to live as a resident. And I knew that New York and Boston and anything out on the West Coast was off the list. So Pittsburgh was a great choice, wonderful program. And then when I left, I joined a group practice in Pittsburgh, and Todd was one of the sites. He was one of the individual offices in our group practice.
So was that a larger like group practice without walls, or was that just one practice owned by the same person with different offices?
No, it was an alliance of I think at the time about 7 or 8 offices, and there were initially individual offices, and they came together under one scope to combine resources and to combine management and then buying power for vaccines and such. And I've said this before, but I think if I had joined Todd's office from day one, I'd probably still be in Pittsburgh today, because he was such an innovative kind of person. And I know we're going to get into this, but one of the reasons I left pediatrics was the lack of innovation in my particular office.
And then at some point you moved into the neighborhood here in Virginia and worked with me at Pediatrics at Night.
Yeah, so that was basically, I worked in an office and it was a partner in an office for about 7 years in Pittsburgh. And at one point, my wife and I just said, we need a little more support with the kids. And so we decided to either move closer to my family or her family, and her family won. So we left Pennsylvania, we moved to Virginia, a little closer to her family. And that's when I got another job working in primary care. And at that time, I had a strong interest in urgent care. In fact, I had actually gotten board certified in urgent care medicine. And that's why I met you. And I was actually on the fence. Do I want to try and start my own urgent care? Do I want to go back to primary care? Would I join an urgent care? And so I had a lot of options on the table. And that's when we met.
And so then I burned you out, and you went and got a master's degree and left the industry. So how did you come about choosing? Because George has an MBA, but you have an MMM, and I'm not quite sure what the difference between the degrees are and how you came about, other than I burned you out, going on to get that master's degree.
Sure, and maybe George can give some comments, but I can tell you I joined the American College of Physician Executives. And I did some work with them, some of their individual classes, and they are, they're strong backers of some of the MBA or other programs. And so one of the programs that they educate about and push is the Masters of Medical Management. It's only done in a couple of locations, Carnegie Mellon. I think there's one on the West Coast. I think there's one in Louisiana. And they all talk about some of the executive MBAs, one being at UMass. And at the time, I was still in Pennsylvania, and Carnegie Mellon was in my backyard. So it was really a good match. They also sold me on the fact, they said the MMM is basically, it's a MBA for doctors. It's a prerequisite to be an MD for the MMM. And because of that, there's less finance and there's less accounting. And I said, well, that's for me. And anytime I can skip on accounting, that was better. So I don't know, George, maybe you have some different thoughts on the MBA versus the MMM.
I did a similar path as you did, also with the Certified Physician Executive Program, which is called AAPL now. I did that because initially I was interested in, the business of medicine. I'm pretty good at the private practice end, but I'm just an MD, so I needed something extra. You couldn't get into anything else if you don't have a master's of some sort. A lot of people tried to discourage me and tell me, well, why do you need it? You've already done it. So somebody told me about the Certified Physician Executive Program. It was great because, it was all CME credits. So I had so many CMEs after doing that. And those credits then transferred to the MBA program at the UMass Amherst, which is probably the same thing that you did. All your credits from there, the prerequisites, went to your master's program. And then you just completed the program later at your leisure. It was no stress.
It was a great network opportunity too. Some really interesting physicians.
I would say
at those meetings.
I met a lot of good doctors there. I would think that the majority of the doctors I met that followed the MMM path were advancing their way up academic medicine. You saw a lot of department heads, head of radiology, head of orthopedics, and the MBA is probably a bit more flexible. So I think in retrospect, MBA is also more recognizable. I often get people say, what is this MMM? But yeah, I thought it was great. And I think it did help me with my transition from practice into industry. I picked up a couple good skills.
So the first industry I remember that you went into, I think it was a company called Metamune, which has now been sold. Is that right?
Metamune was acquired by AstraZeneca, I think in like 2007, 2006. They were pretty hands-off for multiple years, kept the name, kept the logo, but now they've kind of completely integrated Metamune into AZ, into their vaccines and their monoclonal business. But that was actually a really easy start for me. I started at a company that had a lot of pediatricians because at the time they had two products. They had the Synagis, which is for premature babies. So lots of pediatricians, lots of like-minded doctors there. And then Flumis. And even though Flumis was indicated up to age 49, most of its use was in pediatrics. And the many years I spent in practice, especially working with the section of practice management, I had a lot of the skills and knowledge they needed for that work, which is how do physicians order the vaccine? How do they utilize the vaccine? Do they want to order all of them at once? Do they need to order multiple different brands and different ones for different age groups? Those under 2 and the half dose and the full dose. And so they had a lot of these logistical practice management questions, and I was able to address those. And I think it really helped me get my very first job in industry.
Wow. I am sure a lot of people don't understand this MMH and MBA stuff. I mean, you left pediatric medicine and you went to the industry. What is it that you do there? Exactly. So you work with vaccines.
Yeah, well, I think a couple of the big terms people don't understand. I might just clarify some of those. When you work in industry as a physician, there's probably a couple of big categories you can work in. You can work in R&D. So if you're a research scientist, PhD, but obviously I'm not that. I don't create vaccines. You can work in clinical development, and that's actually very common for medical doctors. Clinical development takes a new product that was made by R&D and puts it into your phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials to make sure the product or the vaccine is safe and efficacious. And then once it gets approved by a regulatory body like the FDA, it gets handed off to medical affairs. Medical affairs is then the kind of the ambassador of that product in the post-approval world. They work on post-licensure studies, very large safety studies, very large efficacy and effectiveness trials. But also medical affairs does a ton of other things. They work with advocacy groups. They work with physicians. They work on the field-based medicine. They do lots of things, publications, conferences. So that's the area that I work in now. And I like it because it's probably the most dynamic, and we touch so many different aspects of the company.
Interesting.
And so for Metamune, you went to Gilead to work on RSV.
Yeah, I had a chance to move out to the West Coast, and this is when I actually moved from medical affairs to clinical development. I had to acquire some new skills. I had to learn a little bit about phase one, had to buff up on my epidemiology and statistics skills. But there we were working on a fusion inhibitor for RSV. And of course, all the pediatricians listening to this will know that RSV is the holy grail for pediatrics. They've been working on a vaccine forever for multiple companies, and Gilead has a long history in antivirals, working with HIV, of course, and then Hep C, and they had a really nice fusion inhibitor. Unfortunately, it only worked if you gave it within 6 hours of being sick, and as you know, that's just impossible. Yeah, so it worked very well in a kind of artificial environment, but in reality, your kids you're sick 2-3 days before they come in with their symptoms. And at that point, the viral load's already up here, the symptoms are already in place, and it just didn't work. But it was some great experience and some great knowledge gained.
And then you did a short stint out in France with diagnostics, and came back to where you had started in Gaithersburg. And now you're working on other vaccines. Is that right?
I have. I had a chance to move full circle. Exactly. So I started in vaccines with FluMist. I'm now working on COVID-19 vaccines at Novavax. And for me, it was particularly exciting because it's very unusual to have the entire nightly news discuss one topic, the topic that you're working on. It's like, imagine if the entire newscast from 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock was all about otitis media. The pediatricians would be like, woohoo. So for me, it was very exciting to work in an area that the entire globe was talking about. And so it was a lot of energy and a lot of excitement.
So I have two very scientific questions.
Mm-hmm.
One is, how come the flu vaccine and the COVID vaccines doesn't seem to matter what the product is, only seems to be effective for 6 months, and then it drops off? Why haven't we been able to change that?
I think this probably it's a complicated question. I mean, one, we know antibodies always drop, so you can't get any disease where you get antibodies that don't drop off after time. Antibodies are supposed to drop off. You don't want to have tetanus antibodies circulating in your bloodstream forever. What you want is memory B cells that hang around. So we do know that the titers will drop. But we also do know that a lot of these studies, and this is artificial, just the way the studies were done. These studies were done as what we call event-driven trials, which basically means as soon as they got enough cases, they did a data freeze and they assessed the efficacy. So they did the efficacy at 2-3 months after vaccination. And then they did it a little bit while later, whereas flu vaccines typically done at the end of the season. They start vaccinating in September, October, and they cut the trial and they look at the data in April or May. So vaccine trials by flu are typically done at 8, 10, 12 months. And so what happens is if you do a study and you do your first data cut only a couple of months after you vaccinate, your vaccine efficacy are quite high. And then if you do it again, 6 months later, it drops down. If you do it maybe a month later, it's going to drop down some more. I think that's natural. I think you'd see that in almost any vaccine. But the question would be is how low is too low, and do you need to boost every year? And I think that's not universally agreed upon yet by the experts.
You see, and then the other one, which just sort of fascinates me, I remember all the arguments and controversy when the varicella vaccine came out, and it all really, went around. Do we really need to vaccinate kids against chickenpox? Most of them do fairly well. But it's a safe and effective vaccine. And then they did the cost analysis or the return on investment, as you guys would say. And they showed that vaccinating would actually save dollars that would be spent at the back end. and it was a cost-effective vaccine. However, we didn't do that with a COVID vaccine. Why?
Yeah, the health economics didn't play much of a role for a couple of reasons. Probably number one is that the vaccines were being purchased by governments. And governments were actually at that phase that we were in a sheer panic state. If you look at what some of the initial countries did, is they bought sometimes 3 to 4 times the number of vaccines needed to vaccinate their entire populations. And they bought it from different manufacturers. And so basically money was not an issue. I mean, they were in a panic state, and they were like, we will buy all the vaccine to cover our country fourfold. And I don't know how there was any kind of agreed upon price. That was done by the business folks. And so no health economics came into it. Now, when we shift from the payer going from a country to individuals like Blue Cross Blue Shield or individual payers, that's when we're going to start seeing the rubber hit the road, and people start saying, okay, show me your data, show me your safety and efficacy, and we'll pick a price point, and we'll see if your price point is backed up by your data. And that's when the health economics will come into play. But when you have a single payer, and, like government, it didn't come into play. And I thought the other thing is the fact that we were just rushing. I mean, basically there was, remember 2 years ago, people were in a complete panic. They didn't want to sit there and say, well, I tell you what, we can do this study in 2 months and get you some efficacy data, or we can do it in 6 months and throw in some health economics. What do you think? And the answer was, we want the data as soon as we can get it, and we want it now. And so it just wasn't done.
Well, that makes sense. And then I always ask this of the people that are kind enough to come and be with us. What book are you reading now? I know you don't read. You're like George. You listen to books on tape. So what are you listening to nowadays?
Well, I used to listen to books on tape when I drove, but now I don't drive. So now actually I do read. I read real books with paper and everything. I usually I go into my wife's library, and I go into the management ones, and I pull out something interesting. And the one I'm reading now is called The Corporate Athlete. It's an oldie but goodie. I think it was written in the 80s or 90s. It really is, it's about, balancing, the mind body balance to make sure that you're physically fit, that you have the mental endurance, the physical endurance to do your job well. So it's a little bit dated, but I find it helpful because, right now, working long hours is really like being in a marathon. And I think that the connection between your body and mind during this pandemic has probably been more important than any other time. You cannot just sit there and work long hours and then sit down on the couch and eat potato chips. You really need to keep your body up. And so for me, it's been a great book.
Wow. I have a question for you, Seth.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, I'm sure a lot of people want to know, are you happy that you made the move from practice to the industry?
Yeah, I am. I am happy. I love being a pediatrician. I think it was the only job I was really, really good at. I love seeing the families. I love seeing the kids. I love seeing the hard cases. I'd see a case and I'm like, oh, persistent headaches. And I would love trying to figure out the mystery of what was going on. And then watching the kids grow up. But there was a lot of things that were frustrating. The insurance companies, the long hours, spending my entire lunchtime on the phone answering questions and never eating. So that was troublesome. Plus, I unfortunately had some partners that just weren't very innovative. They were just happy to see the 30, 40 kids a day. I had these great ideas. I wanted to extend hours. I wanted to hire efficient extenders and do more, as Herb knows, more urgent care, do splints and crutches and ankle slings and splints. And I just wasn't getting any satisfaction. So I really wanted to move into an area that was more academic. I love to write articles. In fact, I wrote my first 4 articles were just case studies I saw in my office. And I love to give presentations and speak. Right. And now I actually get paid for reading articles, making PowerPoints, giving presentations. So I think it was very, very good for me. And I love the academic atmosphere.
I've seen that, what you commented with working with other people. I've seen that over and over, which is the reason practices fall apart. They don't let the younger guy advance and do things. And I think that's the breeder of physician burnout. Yeah, no, I can believe that. And I wasn't asking for anything crazy. I was asking, let's think about a satellite. Let's look at some demographics. Let's expand. What can we do that's fee for service? That the point people were selling, breast pump equipment, and they were doing generic antibiotics and things like that.
And these are all fee for service, relatively easy things to accomplish. And I just got no, 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 and no. And I said, you know what, I need to innovate. I really need to keep my enthusiasm up, or I'm going to get bored.
Yeah, the statement that you'll get is, we've always done it this way, so why should we change?
Yes.
And
That's the most toxic words in medicine.
yes, the most toxic word in medicine. We've always done it this way, so why should we change?
Followed by, show me the data. Well, I can't show you the data till we try it.
Yeah. So it's a sad story that you ended up like that. Now, was that practice still in practice?
Yeah, they're still in practice.
Yeah.
And actually, and Dr. Bravo, I did show them the data. I showed them demographics about where I wanted to place the satellite. I showed them declining numbers of newborns that we're having year over year. And, you know, when you don't have enough newborns, your practice dies. I mean, it's basically newborns are the lifeblood. Yeah. And I said, you know, we should do things like support nurses' days or send out baskets to new people that move in. And they just thought I was being silly. And I was like, well, this is how you get new practices, new patients.
These are simple things that you learn at the masters and the MBA classes.
Yeah, simple, exactly.
101 things.
Yeah.
Wow. Terrible.
So who would you like us to host, Seth?
I think I mentioned this on LinkedIn. One of my previous partners in Pittsburgh is a good friend of mine, Dr. Todd Belin.
Oh, he's coming.
Yeah, he is. I suggested him. He's a great guy. He's developed an expert niche in vaccine hesitancy, and he's got a wonderful story to tell. You got to ask him about how he got into that, because he's got a great story to tell, how he took on the world of the anti-vaxxers and then just kind of jumped into it with both feet. And he's a great storyteller. So he will be a perfect person for you guys.
Yeah, no, he's already confirmed, and we're going to just set a date with him. He gave me his secretary to reach out to.
Super.
So that's great. What do you think of our podcast? And do you have any suggestions for our pediatricians and other doctors that are listening?
Yeah, I mean, I think you should continue to talk about the things that are not talked about, like the reimbursement issues, the quality of life issues, the burnout issues. I mean, we can talk about taste media all you want, that gets boring, or how to sneak carrots into kids' foods. But I would say, if you had a topic, a little bit of advice, I would let people know about the options for working for industry. Because, initially when I joined 20 years ago, I got a lot of, slack, or you're joining the dark side, you're doing the evil work. And, I was not selling Lipitor. I was selling flu vaccines and doing it from the inside and trying to tell them how a pediatrician thinks to make sure that we could protect more kids. And at the time, FluMist had great data. So I thought, here I am protecting more kids, probably saving more lives than I was doing it one kid at a time. So I think it's important to let residents know that this is an option when you're working for a company making vaccines or making new antileptics for children, or other things, is not evil work. You're doing the work that needs to be done. Right. Vaccines and products save lives. And sure, there's always a dark side. Is there over marketing in some areas and some bad side? Yeah, sure. But if you hire high quality, ethical pediatricians to do the work, you're going to get high quality output of that work. And I think people should know that's an option.
Great.
I can tell you from practice, this past year through the COVID, the flu vaccine rates have decreased dramatically. I couldn't even give it away at one point.
Yeah.
Fast forward to this past couple of months. Do you know what the number one positive test I have? Flu positive, influenza. It's like 7, 8 to 10 a day. Yet nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It blows your mind.
Yeah.
I guess next year there's going to be an uptick in the flu, because this year we had, so many flu cases.
Yeah, we need a better flu vaccine. That's another holy grail out there, about better flu vaccine.
Better flu vaccine, better administration of the flu vaccine, better distribution of the flu vaccine, better, embracing of the flu vaccine. People dismiss the flu vaccine as not important. I remember I'm of the generation that worked before the flu vaccine. I used to see so much flu, so many secondary infections. I used to go home just choking. It was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this the rest of my life? Flu vaccine was dropped down to 6 months. It was like illness disappeared. Yep. Throw in the Prevnar into the mix. There's no more ear infections. Gone. Chicken pox. you know, chickenpox. You said, what's the big deal with chickenpox? You know what? I was a generation that actually saw the secondary effects of chickenpox illness in the hospital. Cerebralitis, secondary infections, a whole bunch of them.
Pneumonia.
They're not good. They're not good.
So Seth, without predicting the future, do you think we will get a better flu vaccine at some point in an RSV vaccine, or are those too far off the radar?
You know, some of the flu vaccines out there right now are better. There's a high dose one. There are adjuvanted and there are recombinant flu vaccines. My company is working on a better influenza vaccine that's both recombinant and adjuvanted. And so we have the high hopes for a better flu vaccine. And RSV, I can tell you that's a nut we've been working on since the 1960s. And there are a couple players out there that are pretty far along. So I think we'll be seeing something pretty soon. You know, there's also that long-acting monoclonal antibody that was actually created by Metamune and is now being licensed through Sanofi that acts a lot like a vaccine. It's basically like a long-acting synergist, and they're gonna treat it like a vaccine. So that has some high hopes. I can't remember the name for it. It's like Nizidamir or something. It's got some. It's hard. No, it's something mob. It's a monoclonal antibody. It's hard to pronounce, and it took me like 6 years to learn how to say palivizumab. So maybe that one will take me another 6 years. So we're getting there. I think we will see great strides in both RSV and flu in the next 2 to 3 years.
Well, do you have any more questions, George?
I think we're good.
Well, thank you, Seth, so much for coming on our podcast.
Nice to meet you in person, finally.
Yeah, no, it's great to meet you guys, and great to see people talking about these kind of cool topics in pediatrics. I think it needs to be done.
Okay, cool.
Okay, see you all guys soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The Pediatric Lounge, a podcast taking you behind the door of the physician's lounge to get a deeper insight into just what docs are talking about today.